He had it all: wealth, respect, legacy. But then someone whispered 5 words that shattered everything. Does your son know you? The first message arrived on a Tuesday, folded in half and slipped beneath the windshield wiper of his Aston Martin. David Cartwright almost missed it. He'd parked in the reserved spot outside the Van Alden Foundation, where he sat on the board and liked to be seen doing good. It was raining. He thought it was a flyer. Only when the paper clung stubbornly to the glass did he notice the plain white envelope: no return address, no markings. Inside, a single typed line. The truth or destruction. You choose. No signature. No instructions. No price. Just a promise. At first, he laughed. Not loudly, but that kind of tense exhale that escapes when something hits just wrong. He glanced around the parking lot. Cameras. Valets. Strangers under umbrellas. No one watching. Nothing unusual. And yet, the note in his hand had the kind of gravity that made his fingers tremble. That night, alone in his penthouse, he drank a third glass of scotch and stared out over the city. Rain streaked the windows. In the dark reflection of the glass, he didn't see a successful investor or philanthropist. He saw the version of himself he thought he'd buried in 2006, before the IPO, before the marriage, before the first million hit his account. He didn't sleep. The second message came 2 days later. This time, it was a small envelope taped to the elevator mirror in his private parking garage. Inside, a photo. Him. 17 years ago. Younger, leaner, with bloodshot eyes and a busted lip. Standing in front of a rundown motel in Bakersfield, California. Holding a duffel bag. Next to a girl. He sat on the hood of his car, the engine idling, as the memory punched him square in the gut. Her name had been Marissa. He hadn't said that name out loud in over a decade. Marissa Chen. Wild, brilliant, dangerous. She had the kind of laugh that made men forget to breathe. Back then, they were both running from something, her from a violent stepfather, him from the consequences of a deal gone sideways in Fresno. They shared a car, a dream, a stash of stolen money, and a promise: disappear, start over, never look back. But David did look back. And when he did, Marissa wasn't there. He'd left with the money. By Friday, the third message arrived. Hand-delivered this time. His assistant, Lorna, knocked on his office door, brow furrowed. This just came in for you. Courier. No return info. He took the envelope, heart hammering. 3 days until your past becomes public. Unless we speak. An address followed. A name: Carmine's Diner. Sunday. Noon. That night, David didn't go home. He drove for hours. Up the coast, past Malibu, all the way to a gas station in Oxnard, where he sat for 20 minutes staring at the bathroom mirror. He didn't recognize his own eyes. They looked hunted. He had spent years burying that version of himself. Changing his name. Buying silence. Hiring people to make documents disappear. By the time he married Claire, he was clean. Refined. Respected. She never asked too many questions. But someone knew. Someone had the photo. The timing, the place. That couldn't be a coincidence. It had to be her. Could Marissa have found him after all these years? And what did she want? Money. Revenge. Or something worse. On Sunday morning, he shaved carefully. Pressed a navy suit. Skipped breakfast. When he walked into Carmine's, the bell over the door jingled like in an old western. A few retirees sipped coffee. A kid in a booth played on a tablet. No sign of her. He sat at a booth near the back. Waited. Watched. At exactly 12:06, a woman slid into the seat across from him. No smile. No greeting. Older than the photo. But the eyes, sharp, calculating, sad, were unmistakable. Marissa. Hello, David, she said, folding her hands on the table. Long time. He swallowed hard. What do you want? She tilted her head, as if studying a stranger. I want you to listen. Then I want you to choose. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. Heavy, matte paper. Henry Carter turned it over in his hands, unsettled by the weight of something so ordinary. He knew what it was even before he tore the seal, not the content, but the intention. Destruction doesn't always kick down the door. Sometimes it whispers. Inside, a photograph. Old. Grainy. A woman in a tattered blue dress holding a child. The background, unmistakable. A dirt path winding through a slum in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And scrawled across the back of the photo, in red ink, "Does your son know who you really are?" Henry's hands trembled, just for a moment. Then he folded the photo neatly, returned it to the envelope, and locked it inside his desk drawer, second one down, beneath contracts and trust paperwork. The drawer he hadn't opened in 6 years. By noon, he was at his club in Brentwood, sipping a double espresso, pretending to read the Wall Street Journal. Pretending not to feel the invisible wire tightening around his throat. He built his wealth on concrete. Literally. Infrastructure in Central America, roads, bridges, ports. He was the man American companies called when the work was too dirty or dangerous for local firms. He spoke Spanish like a native and knew which generals to bribe. But that was 20 years ago. Now, Henry was the face of Carter Capital, clean, sharp, and sanctified by the business pages. Private equity, development projects, a few philanthropic ventures. On paper, he was exactly what the glossy profiles claimed: self-made, divorced, refined. Father to a teenage son who still thought of him as a complicated but fundamentally good man. That photo could crack the whole sculpture. 2 days later, a second envelope. Same weight. This time, a flash drive. No note, just a short video, the same slum, but recent. A girl's voice narrating in Spanish, describing the explosion. The death toll. The shortcuts that led to a bridge collapse Henry had signed off on, indirectly, through shell companies and disappearing LLCs. The girl in the video was the same woman from the photograph, now older, hardened. And she knew his name. Attached, a single line of text in English. $2 million. Offshore. 3 weeks. Or your son gets the video. Henry sat in the dark that night, the California moon casting pale streaks across the marble floor of his kitchen. His son, Malcolm, was asleep upstairs. 16. Smart, tender-hearted. A cellist. Knew nothing of Honduras. Nothing of the blood-soaked contracts Henry once negotiated with mercenaries posing as contractors. He poured whiskey. Neat. Didn't sip. Henry had survived worse than extortion. But this wasn't about money. This was a threat wrapped in moral clarity, and those are the most dangerous kinds. He made a list. Quietly. First name, Alan Drysdale, his longtime fixer. Second, Liza, the only journalist who ever got close to the truth and then vanished into academia. Third, Maribel, the woman in the video. The one who had once trusted him. A choice loomed ahead of him like a cliff's edge. Confess. Or pay. But there was one thing Henry knew with certainty: blackmailers never stop with one payment. So he made a third choice. And that night, he left a message on a secure line, one he hadn't used in almost a decade. Alan. It's me. I need a cleanup. Quiet, fast, and off-grid. This isn't about cash. It's about my son. Alan Drysdale hadn't aged well. When Henry met him at the off-books airstrip in Barstow, he looked like a man who hadn't slept since the recession. But his handshake was still iron, and his eyes still measured risk like a man placing bets with someone else's life. You sure about this? Alan asked, throwing a duffel into the back of the SUV. This isn't just cleanup. This is memory erasure. I don't want her hurt, Henry said. Alan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. They drove in silence until the freeway curved into the scorched bones of the desert. Maribel had resurfaced for a reason. Henry knew her better than most, proud, unrelenting, driven by justice once she'd found religion in pain. If she'd come for him now, it wasn't just for money. She wanted reckoning. Back in L.A., Malcolm was asking questions. Henry's assistant had texted earlier, he's been calling. Something about college interviews. Should I stall? Henry had replied, tell him I'm in negotiations overseas. That word, negotiations, used to mean something else. Now it was a veil. A lie he wore like a pressed suit. By the time they reached the safe house in Joshua Tree, Alan had already traced the IP address from the flash drive's metadata. It led to a charity's headquarters in San Pedro, one with ties to Maribel. It was legit. Legal. Built from trauma. She's gone full righteous, Alan muttered, squinting at the laptop screen. You sure you don't want me to offer a settlement? We wire her $2 million, sign a silence clause. She'll leak it anyway, Henry said. That video. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. She wants the world to see. Alan leaned back, exhaling. So we hit back. Henry didn't answer. He was staring at the screen, at a still frame from the video. Maribel, standing in the rubble of the collapsed bridge, holding up a picture of a child. Her child. He zoomed in. And froze. The boy in the photo looked like Malcolm. He blinked. Stared again. Same eyes. Same arch of the brow. It couldn't be. But something twisted in his gut. Enhance this, he said. Alan did. And then turned slowly toward him. Jesus, Henry. Did you ever sleep with her? It was 20 years ago, Henry said, but his voice sounded too thin. Alan didn't move. Do you think it's possible? No, Henry said. Then, after a pause, I don't know. A silence thick as concrete fell between them. The next day, Henry flew alone to San Pedro. No SUV. No security. He showed up at the charity's doorstep in a gray coat and dark sunglasses. The receptionist recognized him instantly. We've been expecting you, she said, and led him down a narrow hallway. Maribel was waiting in a windowless room. She stood when he entered, arms crossed. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I had to. There was a beat of silence. Her eyes searched him, scanning for weakness, regret, something real. You abandoned more than a contract, she said. You knew that bridge wasn't safe. You knew. And then you vanished. I tried to fix it. Too late. 17 dead. Including my sister. He flinched. Then she said, quieter, and a son who might be yours. Henry staggered into the chair across from her, all the pretense gone. Why now, he asked. Because he asked. He saw your name in a magazine. Your face. He figured it out. Henry's throat tightened. Does he hate me? Maribel shook her head. He wants to meet you. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, Henry couldn't breathe. This wasn't extortion. This was an invitation to redemption. But only if he was willing to burn down the myth he'd built. Henry didn't remember leaving the building. One moment he was in the room with Maribel, the truth coiled like a live wire between them. The next, he was walking the length of the harbor alone, the sea wind knifing through his coat. A son. His son. The weight of it buckled him. Not just the biology, but the fact that someone, flesh of his own, born of something beautiful and broken, had been walking this world without him. Wondering. Wanting. And now, knocking on the gates of his carefully constructed kingdom. He drove back in silence, the city shimmering like a mirage through the windshield. Somewhere in Beverly Hills, Malcolm was probably waiting on an answer about Stanford. Probably wondering why his father had been distant, his voice clipped. Henry had always told himself that protecting his son meant shielding him from the past. Now that past had a name. A face. A voice. Alan called him twice. He didn't answer. When he finally returned home, the lights were off, but Malcolm's bedroom door was ajar. The boy was inside, curled on the floor with sheet music spread around him, headphones clamped over his ears. He looked up, startled. Dad. Henry stared at him for a long time, the words building behind his teeth like storm clouds. I have to tell you something, he said. They sat in the living room. No preamble. No soft landing. Henry laid it out, Maribel, Honduras, the bridge, the possibility. He didn't say, mistake. He didn't say, youth or circumstances. He said truth. Malcolm didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it wasn't anger in his voice. It was something far sharper. You lied to me my entire life, he said quietly. I thought I was protecting you. From what? Knowing who you really are. Henry looked at him, this boy who might no longer see him as a father. From becoming like me. The silence was louder than any shouting would have been. Then Malcolm stood and walked upstairs without another word. That night, Henry packed a single suitcase. Left a note for Malcolm. 1 page. Handwritten. Honest. Then he drove to a motel in Long Beach, not unlike the ones he used to haunt during the old days. It smelled of bleach and regret. He lay awake, watching the ceiling fan spin, wondering if legacy was just a fancier word for shadow. 2 days passed. On the third, Maribel called. He wants to meet you, she said. Properly. He said he's ready. Henry's voice cracked when he replied, so am I. They met at a quiet park in Culver City. Sunday morning. Henry arrived first, palms sweating. Then Maribel appeared, walking beside a tall, thin boy with the same eyes Malcolm saw in the mirror every day. His name was Elias. When he approached, he didn't hesitate. Just stood there, looking at Henry like a man who'd already chosen to listen before deciding whether to forgive. You're him, Elias said. I am. Why did you leave? Henry took a breath, heavy with years. Because I was afraid of who I was becoming. And I thought leaving would protect the people I cared about. Elias nodded slowly. It didn't. Henry blinked back something sharp. I know. They sat on a bench. Talked for an hour. Then 2. About music. About dreams. About the space between blood and belonging. At one point, Elias asked, do you think we can start from here? Henry didn't know what forgiveness looked like, but maybe it sounded like that. He nodded. If you want to. Elias smiled. I do. But peace is never permanent. That evening, Alan finally reached him. You need to come back, he said. We have a problem. Someone else has the video now. And they're not asking for money. Henry's throat closed. What are they asking for? Alan hesitated. Your resignation. Publicly. And a full confession. Henry sat down, the air sucked out of the room. They're not just after you anymore, Alan added. They want to burn the whole name. Everything. Your firm, your legacy, your sons. Henry didn't go home. Instead, he checked into another hotel, this one a corporate tower downtown with too much chrome and not enough soul. He paced the room for hours, staring at the television he never turned on. His name was already trending on Twitter, #CarterCollapse. A junior staffer at his firm had leaked the first draft of a whistleblower report. The video followed within the hour. It was cleaner now, edited with timestamps, witness statements, overlays in English. By sunset, every major network had it. The bridge. The deaths. The shell companies. And the implication, no, the confirmation, that Henry Carter had known. Not guessed. Known. And done nothing. Phone calls flooded in. Board members. Investors. His own legal team. One voice cut through all of it. Malcolm. I saw it, his son said. Is it true? Henry closed his eyes. Yes. Silence. You could have told me before the world did. I didn't want you to carry my shame. Maybe I didn't want you to lie. Henry almost dropped the phone. Almost said I'm sorry for the 100th time. But Malcolm had already hung up. By morning, his lawyer arrived. Not one of the soft, white-collar ones in custom suits, but Eleanor Frey, the kind who wore old boots and could smell blood through drywall. They're coming for everything, she said. Your assets, your licenses, your freedom. But I can keep you out of prison. Maybe. Henry didn't flinch. What do I have to do? Give them what they want. Your company. Your seat on the board. Your reputation. And maybe, if you're smart, your name. She handed him a thick manila folder. Start drafting the statement. Full responsibility. Public apology. No hedging. He opened it, saw the letterhead, Carter Capital. The name was a brand. A monument. But now, it was a curse. When Eleanor left, Henry called Maribel. I'm stepping down. I saw, she said. It won't fix what happened. But it matters. He hesitated. I'd like to talk to Elias again. She paused. He's watching. Let him come to you. Then she hung up. By evening, Henry was at the press podium, in front of flashing bulbs and cameras that fed real-time into every screen in the country. I am Henry Carter, he began. And I have failed. He spoke plainly. No spin. No script. He named the villages. The victims. Himself. He spoke not as a CEO, but as a man finally willing to be seen, whole and ruined. The next day, protesters gathered outside his building. Carter Capital's stock plummeted. Clients withdrew. Lawsuits stacked like bricks. And still, Henry felt something he hadn't in years. Relief. That night, as he packed the last of his office into a single worn leather bag, he found an old photo in the drawer, a younger version of himself, grinning in a white hard hat, next to a woman in a sundress. Maribel. Long before the war between them began. He sat for a long while. Then he left the photo behind. Downstairs, the lobby was empty. Just the security guard nodding solemnly as he passed. Outside, the air was thick with June heat and consequence. He didn't look back. Instead, he drove to the edge of the city. A small park. Quiet. And there, on a bench, sat Elias. Waiting. No words at first. Just a nod. Then. You gave it all up, Elias said. Henry sat beside him. No. I gave back what I stole. Elias looked at him, this man who had once been a secret, now broken open. I still don't know if I hate you, the boy said. I wouldn't blame you if you did. I don't think I do. Henry exhaled. That's more than I deserve. They sat in the dark, two shadows cast by a single street lamp. Then Elias reached into his backpack. Pulled out a folder. What's that? Henry asked. My admissions essay. NYU. Thought you might want to read it. Henry took it, hands trembling. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he felt something he'd thought he'd buried alongside the truth. Hope. But not all debts die in daylight. The next morning, Eleanor called again. You have a new problem, she said. Henry braced himself. What now? She spoke slowly. There's another child. From another village. A mother's coming forward. She says you knew her too. The past wasn't done. Not yet. The mother's name was Adela Vargas. Henry didn't recognize it at first. But when Eleanor sent the scanned documents, birth certificate, photos, and an old construction site ledger with his signature scrawled across the bottom, something inside him stirred. A buried corner of memory uncoiled. Dusty. Dangerous. El Rosario, 2005. A housing project meant to impress international investors. He'd flown in for inspections, spent 3 days in a half-finished compound surrounded by poverty and promise. There'd been a translator. A night of celebration. A fire. Rum. And Adela. She had been 20. He'd been 40 and convinced of his own mythology. Now she was 39, living in Guatemala, raising a child who bore his name in silence. A girl, Eleanor said over the phone. 16. Bright. Speaks 3 languages. Wants to be a lawyer. Henry sat at the edge of the hotel bed, palms on his knees, heart caught between disbelief and inevitability. Does she know? Only that her father was American. Until now. What does Adela want? An acknowledgement. Nothing more. No money. No lawsuits. Just for you to face what you did. Henry didn't answer. His thoughts spiraled to Elias, to Malcolm. To the public already feeding on the first scandal like wolves. A second child would confirm the whispers, predator, manipulator, fraud. Even the small redemption he'd clawed back with Elias could be swallowed whole. He met with Adela 3 days later in a small cafe near Echo Park. She wore a green shawl and held a photo of her daughter like a shield. Her posture was quiet but unshaken. You left more than cement behind, she said calmly. You left us a ghost. Henry swallowed. I don't remember all of it. But I believe you. She slid the photo across the table. The girl had his eyes. His stubborn chin. Her name is Lucia. He nodded, unable to speak. I don't want your guilt, Adela said. I just want the truth to stop hiding. Henry stared at the photo. What does she know about me? She knows enough to want to meet you. But not yet. You'll have to earn it. It was a strange mercy, this woman who could have destroyed him choosing instead to invite him, slowly, into accountability. I'll do whatever it takes, he said. Adela nodded once, then left without shaking his hand. Henry walked the streets afterward, anonymous again for the first time in weeks. The city buzzed without noticing him. He found strange comfort in that, his name was fading, and maybe that was the point. When he returned to the hotel, Malcolm was waiting in the lobby. I read your statement, his son said. It was real. Henry nodded. I wanted it to be. Malcolm shifted. Mom says you're not the man she divorced. I'm not sure I'm any man worth knowing, Henry admitted. Well, you're trying. That's more than most. They walked together for a while. No plans. No destination. Just a long overdue silence that didn't hurt. By the following week, Henry had sold the last of his shares. The firm removed his name. Carter Capital became Equinox Development. A bland, forgettable moniker. His legacy, at least the public one, was ash. But something new was beginning. He started teaching night classes at a local community college. Infrastructure ethics. Half the students didn't know who he was. The other half only knew what the internet said. Either way, it didn't matter. He taught like a man undoing something. One evening, after class, a young woman approached him. Lucia, she said. It took a moment to land. I asked my mother for your address, she said. I wanted to see you. For myself. Henry stood, his voice stuck in his chest. I don't know what to say. Then don't, she said, smiling softly. Just walk with me. So he did. They walked through the parking lot, past orange-lit lampposts and the faint sound of students laughing nearby. He didn't reach for her hand. Didn't ask for anything. But when she turned to him and said, I don't hate you, he nearly collapsed. The past was a ruin, but somehow, through smoke and silence, something was growing again. 6 months later, Henry stood on a makeshift stage beneath a flickering community center light. The room was filled with plastic chairs, folding tables, and people who looked nothing like the boardrooms he once ruled. Beside him stood Elias, dressed in jeans and a pressed shirt, holding a stack of programs. On the back wall, a banner read, Ethics in Action, Rebuilding Trust from the Ground Up. Henry adjusted the mic. When I was younger, he began, I believed success meant being untouchable. That the more I built, the more I could bury. But I was wrong. What you bury doesn't disappear. It grows in the dark. And eventually, it comes looking for you. No applause. Just silence. Listening. The kind that meant people weren't just hearing, they were weighing his words against their own scars. I hurt people, he said. Some of them are in this room. Some of them never will be. I can't undo that. But I can spend whatever years I have left doing something else. Not rebuilding a brand. But rebuilding trust. One life at a time. This time, they clapped. A little. Enough. Afterward, Maribel approached him. She looked tired but proud. You're finally starting to sound like the man you always pretended to be. He smiled, almost sheepish. I had a good teacher. Lucia came next. She didn't speak. Just hugged him, quick, unsure, but real. He felt it all the way to his bones. Outside, the night air smelled of rain and asphalt. Henry leaned against a railing while Elias packed the last of the pamphlets into a tote bag. You nervous about the NYU interview? Henry asked. Elias shrugged. A little. But I've got a pretty unique essay. They both laughed, soft and bittersweet. Malcolm arrived late, as always. He didn't say much, just stood beside Henry, hands in his pockets, eyes on the parking lot. Mom says you're turning into a decent person, Malcolm said. I'm trying. You know, Malcolm added, the cello recital's next month. You should come. Henry blinked. I'd love to. Then Malcolm turned to him. But don't sit in the back. That night, Henry drove home alone. Home was a small one-bedroom rental now, no marble, no view. Just clean sheets, a coffee machine, and a growing stack of letters from people he'd once harmed. Some angry. Some forgiving. Some still deciding. He kept them all. He read them when the guilt clawed back. Not to punish himself, but to remember the weight. The cost. One evening, he pulled an old box from the closet. Inside, the first envelope, the one that started it all. The truth or destruction. You choose. He stared at it for a long time. Then he wrote underneath, I chose both. And finally, he exhaled.